It's good to see so many ESD board members and staff joining us today. Though we were hoping to come together in person this year, out of due diligence in the wake of the pandemic, we needed to make the call earlier this spring to move the meeting virtual. I'm very hopeful that this time next year we'll be back together in person. As we get started, I'd like to introduce Marcia Henkel, the AESD Executive Board's Vice President, who will be presiding over the majority of today's meeting. When President John Zurfluh stepped down from his position as president last August, Marcia gracefully stepped in to support and facilitate the work of the board over the course of this year. Thank you, Marcia, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. On behalf of the AESD Executive Board, I am thrilled to welcome you all, near and far, to the 2022 annual membership meeting. As Tim shared, I'm Marcia Henkel, Vice President of the AESD Executive Board and proud member of the North Central ESD Board of Directors. Our theme for this meeting today is the power of one network. We thought this very appropriate given how our ESDs have come together even more the past 2 years of this pandemic to support and respond to the needs of our district. And just because we're not physically together, although I think many of us would like to be, I am proud that we can come together today to learn, to celebrate, and to move the AESD forward for the coming year. Since we are virtual, there are a few Zoom tips that will help make our time here today successful and productive. To take us through these, I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Jessica Vargas, and ask her to share a few Zoom meeting logistics.
Thank you, Marcia, and hi, everybody. Great to see you. I'm here for the logistics piece. So some of you have figured out how to change your names on the screen. We don't want you to actually change your name, but we'd like you to add to your name. So we're hoping just so to help with connecting virtually, this is step-by-step. If you're at a computer, if you're at a phone, it's a little harder, but basically what you do is you find your name in the participant list, and you can hover over your name. There might be 3 dots next to it, or you might see your name and then mute and more next to it. And then you can type in or add to your name. So if you're able, Dale, I see you've got it going on. If you can add to your name and type in your region and maybe your role if you can. You can also do that in chat. So we're also hoping that folks engage in the chat today. As you further on, I think you noticed as well that we will be hosting a few breakout sessions. And I know Marcia and team and the Capital Region team, you're all together. And so I think your admin support has set you up with multiple devices. So when it's time to go into the breakout rooms, you'll be able to do that smoothly and effectively. So again, just sort of other Zoom etiquette. Ideally, even though we're not together, we'd love to see your beautiful faces. So please, if you can have your camera on, that'd be awesome. If you could also mute yourself when you're not speaking. If we get background noise, we can also mute you, which then you have to unmute yourself. So we do have some superpowers in Zoom land. We are recording. You should have seen something pop up on your screen to let you know we are recording today. And then just like we did last year, we'll be snipping apart the presentations today so that your colleagues who aren't here will be able to relive it as if they were here. And again, please do feel free to use the chat box. If you're not familiar with the chat box, here's just a quick snapshot of how to engage in the chat. There should be a little word bubble next to the participants on your Zoom menu bar. And then you can type, I believe in my Zoom room, you can chat people individually. You can also send messages to the whole group. So that's just a quick spin on the Zoom world logistics, and I'll hand it back to Marcia.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to start our meeting by having everyone stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand, everyone. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Additionally, as part of our opening, I'd like to open with honoring the native lands on which we are all located throughout the state of Washington. Over the past 2 years, several of our ESDs have worked with tribal leaders in our regions to create land acknowledgements unique to our region. Today, as we come together as a statewide ESD network, I'd like to acknowledge and honor with gratitude that we are situated on the homelands of Pacific Northwest tribal nations who have been stewards of these lands since time immemorial. If you'd like to learn more about the tribes closest to the school districts in your regions and Native education in our state, we'll put a couple of links in the chat where you can learn more. Okay, Jessica, I'm going to hand it back to you, and you're going to introduce our sponsors.
You're on mute, Jessica.
You know, you'd think we'd learn, huh? So before I get into thanking our sponsors, I'd like to just give a quick overview of the agenda with a few more details as to what you can expect today. So we've got bookend guests, presenters today. We have State Superintendent Chris Rakedale will be joining us, and at the beginning, and then toward the end of our time together, Executive Director Joan Wade from the Association of Educational Service Agencies, AESA, your national association, will be joining as well. We'll have some shared learning that'll take place and some fun ways to dig into some member orientation materials, networking sessions. And then we'll have a business, the crux of our time together will be around the business meeting, 3 proposals that will be brought forward to you for your vote, and we'll be using Zoom to vote. So we won't be doing the voice votes or raised hands. We'll be using the Zoom technology to help us with that. And then we'll close up the day with some celebrations and a preview to next year, which hopefully we will be in person next year. And then throughout, we will have a few special giveaways that for board members who are here will be putting your name in on a spin wheel and spinning for some fun giveaways for you. This year was pretty exciting. Our sponsors, so Clear Risk Solutions, Rich Moore, Rich McBride, have really stepped up again, multiple years in a row, stepped up to support with our recognitions and our annual Executive Board Award of Distinction. So really appreciate the Clear Risk partnership that we've had over time, and especially this year. We also have a couple of additional sponsors in WSIPSI and Right at School. Cindy Lawson. Oh my gosh, sorry. Cindy Lawson from Right at School is joining us today. And unfortunately, the WSIPSI team is unable to join us. But all of board members, maybe a few staff, have received some pre-conference swag in the mail. This is a lunchtime meeting. So we thought, okay, well, maybe you can pack your lunch in a bag and have some fresh cold water with you that is branded for our network theme today. And then in the giveaway portions of our agenda today, we'll have some opportunities for you to win some gift cards, culminating with some high dollar item Anthony's gift cards at the end of the day. So now we're going to do a few introductions. I think I'm handing it back to Marcia.
Well, okay, I am thanking also for our sponsors. We wouldn't be able to do these nice things for all of us if it wasn't for them. So on slide 9, while we don't have time to do individual introductions, this slide gives you a snapshot of our AESD network. Together, our 9 ESDs serve over 300 school districts, state tribal education compact schools, and public charter schools. We also provide supports to many private schools in our region. Slide 10 gives us a glimpse of each ESD's board members. This group represents the full membership of the AESD. Many of you are new, about 20%, which is great. So again, we're thrilled so many of you are here to join us today. So what we're going to do, we're going to hand it over to the ESD superintendents or their designee to do a quick round of regional introductions. We're going to introduce in order. So we're going to start with Northeast Washington, ESD 101, located in Spokane. And the new superintendent, Rob Recker, will introduce his board staff and board directors who are present. Rob?
Thank you and good morning. Rob Redker, I'll be the new ESD 101 superintendent beginning on July 1st. So excited to be here today and excited to introduce Kathy Bumgarner, new ESD 101 board member, June Sign, new ESD 101 board member, and also AESD executive board member here with us today. So again, thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, next.
Is Tom Fleming from ESD 105 here? Would you be willing to introduce your team?
You bet. So we have 3 board members on today. Jim Seabury, he's been a board member of ours for many years. And we have 2 new board members that just started with us, Alan Taylor and Gwen Troll. And we also have our executive assistant, Robin Granger, on today.
Thank you. 112.
Yeah, this is Tim Merlino at 112. Want to introduce Darlene Stickle. She is our board chair and also our AESD rep. And Mike Nerland, our assistant superintendent for teaching and learning, is with us as well. Thanks.
And 113. Here, 113. 114.
Yeah, good morning. Greg Lynch here from BTSD.
I'll jump in just a second. Sorry.
Yeah, we've got 3 board members here today. Cliff Hennegard, who is our board chair, and also the AESD executive board rep, Ann Burns, and also Stephanie Parker. Thank you.
Okay. Next up.
How about if 113 gives it a try?
Okay, back to, all right, this time.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm pleased to introduce my board members who have joined us here today. Al Cohen, board chair, Bill Lamont, Pam Farr, Don Rash. Harry Cartham's not able to join us yet today, at least in person. Susan Fortin and Dale McDaniel. Also joining us as members of our staff here in person, Kristen Jadon and Tracy Ferguson, and our executive assistants, Cherry Chalmers.
121.
Good morning, everybody. John Welch here with the Puget Sound ESD. We've got a number of board members who are joining us this morning. I think a couple may be in transition, but with us, we have Meret Tekel Dashawarun. Meret is our board chair, and she is also the AESD executive board member. Joining today, we have Barbara Peterson, Peter Mayer, Joanne Sang, and Annie Laurie Armstrong. And joining me in my office today is Jake Senchins. Jake is with the Executives in Residence program through AESA. He serves as a leader in an educational service agency in northern Minnesota. So he's joining us today as well.
Thank you, John. 123.
Morning, everybody. Darcy Weisner here. He's ESD 123 superintendent. Today we have Terry Brandon, board member since 2018, and also our AESD executive rep on the executive board participating. Thank you.
171.
Hi, good morning, everybody. You still have our microphone on, right? It's my pleasure to be here. Michelle Price, Superintendent, North Central ESD. And today in the room, I have our chair, Marcia Hinkle, who's also the AESD chair, Larry McGuffey, our board member, Susan Albert, board member, Michael Musick, board member, Heather Small, the brains of the operation, our executive assistant, Linda McKay, assistant superintendent, Pete Phillips, our Executive Director of Technology, and Jason Williams, our Finance Director here at North Central ESD. Thank you.
Thanks. And 189.
Good morning, everyone. Larry Francois, Superintendent, Northwest ESD 189. Pleasure to be with you all this morning. We're joined by 4 of our board members today. Merle Kirkley, who also serves as our AESD Executive Board Representative. Vice Chair of the Northwest ESD Board, Susan Phillips. Board members Ann McMurray and Mark Venn. And I would just note on the previous slide that Mark is listed as chair. He recently stepped aside, and Charlie Crabtree currently serves as the chair of the Northwest ESD Board. We're also joined with by Assistant Superintendent for Fiscal Services, Lisa Matthews, is with us today.
Thanks, Larry, and I'm going to hand it right back to you so that you can introduce the first guest speaker.
All right, thank you, Marcia. For over 15 years, our 9 ESDs have had the privilege to work as close partners with our state superintendent and his or her staff. Unique to this partnership are the deep relationships we have built over the years and agreements about what a true partnership looks like. Over the past 2 years of the COVID pandemic, the breadth and depth of our shared statewide initiatives and partnerships have only strengthened. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Rakedahl. As someone who believes his path in life is largely owed to the public education he received, Superintendent Rakedahl has dedicated his career to ensuring all learners have equitable opportunities for a high-quality public education. Over the years, he has served as a classroom teacher, school board director, staff for Washington's community and technical colleges, and as a legislator. Since taking office in 2017, Chris has centered OSPI's work on equity and supporting the whole child, reinvigorating career and technical education pathways for students, and strengthening the agency's partnership with the legislature. Please join me in welcoming our State Superintendent, Chris Rakedahl.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Good to see everybody. Welcome again. Boy, times have certainly been transformative in the last couple of years, and it's nice that I don't know about you all, but I'm back on the road quite a bit more. And I used to have a fall schedule and a spring schedule that was very heavy in statewide travel, visiting districts, ESDs, and other community partners. The last 2 years, I felt like we were a bit stifled. I will say I never worked from home, and I'm very proud of that. It's not that it wasn't the right thing for a lot of folks, but that's just not my style at all. I like the interaction. I like the idea that we're still in spaces, largely at the incredible generosity of our taxpayers that represent the institutions of learning. And so when I come to OSPI, it sort of transforms you into that, like, let's go kick some butt for students kind of model that you don't get when you're at home in your pajamas or your laundry's going off or your kids are coming in and out. And so I'm very, very pleased to see the normalcy of some of our interactions return. I wanted to just share a little bit about some observations I've had, and I think it was sort of labeled State of the State. I'm not sure it's going to be that comprehensive. We do one of those now every year as we go into the legislative session. We really try to ground policymakers and where the education system's moved in the prior year. Consider this maybe a little bit of a post State of the State address, or maybe a little bit of a check-in before the next one, which is 7-8 months away here. The status of where we are 2 years into the pandemic here. Incredible transformation. When you think about this at the beginning, the entire goal was hospitalizations. Let's keep those below a threshold in which we were worried about a significant collapse of the acute care system. That caused all kinds of behavior change in the private economy, in the public sector, schools eventually. As you recall, this started 2 years ago as a Puget Sound thing, right? The governor was only going to close schools temporarily in Snow King and Pierce County. Within 24 hours of that, it was bigger than that. And little did we know that this would turn into what would effectively become the most disruptive experience in the history of education in the country. And I say that because we had prior pandemics, but the population of students in the country when this last occurred at this scale 100 years ago was nothing like today. Most students were not completing anything past the 8th grade. It was very few who would go beyond that. And we had it in a time when we were blessed and thankful to have technology. Again, 700,000 of our students had an adequate ability to connect. Another 300,000 we had to rapidly deploy to help. But at least we lived in a moment where that was possible. but it was also a moment where every day the trauma of the pandemic, a reminder of the anxiety and the fear, the racial tension that happened around the country, the absolute chaos that was the last presidential election, the fact that our students are carrying so much anxiety around gun violence and just this larger question of conflict between themselves in the world they live in, it's in front of their face all the time. So I keep reminding folks that this same pandemic at any other time had a much smaller impact, particularly when we were more agrarian and rural. We just didn't have the population density to cause the kind of spread that we saw this time. So it really was something born significantly by young people and our educators and all of you in leadership roles in education. The good news is our grad rates held up quite well. We had set records for 5 straight years in higher graduation rates. We did dip by 0.5% last year, and I'm confident we'll be right around that same level this year. By way of reminder, we use a 4-year cohort model. So we look at our students who started with us as 9th graders and did they graduate, and we look at 4-year rates, 5-year, 6 and 7-year. So undoubtedly, we're going to struggle again a bit for another year or two here. But I think generally speaking, you'll see those numbers stay flat, and then we will resume another increase. So that's very good. Our enrollments were down 4% at the peak. They're already recovering. It was a little disparate depending on where you were in the region and what you offered and how you offered it. But clearly, families on the younger end of the scale hadn't had a lot of experience with us, particularly if you were bringing a 5-year-old into kindergarten for each of the last 2 years. You had never had an experience with your public K-12 system, and they were much more likely to find a private school or stay in a homeschool model for a little while. And we're already seeing that trend reverse again, where a lot of our younger students are being re-enrolled back into our schools. It'll take a while to recover. I will remind you that at 4%, we did pretty darn well. Our higher ed institutions are seeing everything from flat, slight increases to down 15, 20%. And many of them are still well down. We'll talk a bit about it in a moment, but I would also remind everyone something very big and transformational is happening out there. Because even pre-pandemic, our enrollment numbers were increasing slightly year to year based on just demographics. But higher education, particularly 2-year colleges, was down. They were down 30 to 35,000 students over the last 7 or 8 years. So there's a bigger thing happening that the pandemic then exacerbated. Certainly hit higher ed very, very hard. Hit us again by 4% in terms of enrollments, and quite temporary, I think, because you're already seeing some recovery. Our average daily attendance, we look at how many students miss 1 day or more in a week. That number for the 96% of students that are still with us, that number is back to pre-pandemic levels, which is good news. During the height of Omicron, coming off of winter break this year, we saw 30 and 40% of students missing a day or more. We had huge amounts of infection and subsequently infection-based immunity, which is now helping us a lot. But for a while there, Omicron was sort of overtaking everyone. Thankfully, the symptoms were mild and the impacts were mild, and that impact on the acute care system was much lower than under Delta. But it kind of got to everybody, as I say. It really was very ubiquitous. And we saw a lot of lost attendance. Even though we were back in person in school this year, we saw a lot of attendance impacts. But we are now back to the kind of attendance we would have expected before anyone ever heard of the pandemic and COVID. So that's very good news. We have 2 more years and probably going to get an extension on the remaining $2 billion in American Rescue Plan funds that are still out there unspent. By way of reminder, the federal government through 3 rounds ultimately delivered about $3 billion to our state. It was very heavily driven by Title I formulas. So there were other states who proportionally got more, but we're pretty average. So $3 billion under just about any scenario was going to be pretty typical for us. Districts have, again, about 3 years, probably going to get an extension on a lot of this money nationally, but there will be a heck of a fight in Congress after this November's election cycle, because there are folks who say they're not spending it fast enough as justification to pull it back. And we keep reminding them, because you gave us time, this is about recovery and re-acceleration of learning and systems. We spent the first 2 rounds very much on the PPE, the equipment and the systems to make schools safe to reopen them, right? Masking and rapid tests and all of the stuff that we did. in this last round, which is 2 of the 3 billion, it's really for this longer term question of building systems of support when we identify students and communities that need more. And that takes time. So we're reminding both our legislature, don't get cute here, and we're reminding our members of Congress, like there was an intention to have this last and have some duration. But I think you should all be a little nervous about it, because I think there's going to be some folks who are going to get elected around the country who are going to come into the congressional session this next winter and say, hey, they haven't spent all that money, let's pull it back. It's a great way to free up some spending in the federal government. We're going to have to fight that pretty aggressively. Also remind you that 90% of that money by formula went directly to school districts. There was no say in it by OSPI or by the legislature. The legislature added another 3 or 4% of obligation on the money for before school programs, summer school engagement, and a few other activities. So our SEA, our state, was down to about 6 or 7% of the money where we got some discretion. We've committed all of those funds now. About a third of those went to community-based organizations as direct grants to nonprofits, or to College Success Foundation, for example, to help students transition to higher ed. There were other nonprofits, community-based organizations, and associations who got some of those funds. And then the ESDs, of course, are participating in a couple of significant ways, and not the least of which is kind of a regional approach to mental health and student supports on mental health and behavioral health. So again, you know, the theme here is one system, and, you know, this notion of united, and I'm super grateful for the partnership. It's mattered a lot. We were intentional when we got here at OSPI to know where we could be impactful. And I'll remind you that our job here is, you know, according to the constitutions, it's all things supervision of the system. So we're really overseeing the whole system. And it's been translated in law to budget. We're all things budget. We're all things seeking money from the legislature and distributing it, learning standards, certifying educators, and then collecting a whole lot of data and trying to understand the performance of the system. We didn't start as an organization about a whole bunch of programs, and that's been bolted on over the decades by legislators. Every time they have a big idea, it turns into a program. And, you know, I think a lot of that has translated into us saying, we're not the best ones to deliver that. Sometimes we are, but most of the time, if it's a program you want, or it's professional learning you want, we want that in the ESDs. They're closer to the field. There's expertise from the districts that's more likely to be there. All of you as board members are elected by local school district members. There's a different level of trust. And I know that's variable around the state, but generally our approach is the ESDs are best delivering that sort of detailed work that would impact the classroom specifically. And we're big policy, we're big budget, we're some big regulation, right or wrong. We're big data, and we're big certification, and we're going to stay there. That said, we got thrown a bit of a curveball this year, and I think it's important that you all spend time grappling with this, as I know you will in each ESD, but also with each other perhaps. You know, every time we get an inflationary adjustment in this state, which our state ties a lot of these factors to something specific in law, the implicit price deflator, sometimes they tie things to the consumer price index. It depends on your sector, your industry. In K-12, you know, we're tied to IPD, and it's a little bit of a lagging indicator. So this was a year where the school districts got a certain amount because it's in statute, 5.5%, and that's going to go out to all the districts. You all benefit from that. As a state agency, we get 3.25%. We're all facing the same inflationary impacts, but we get essentially 60% of that, and then they only supply it for about half of our positions, because we're so federally funded heavy here with all of our title programs. And all these little bolt-on things I've been trying to tell people about for the last several years, every time they add on a cool little proviso because they think they're going to do a lot in homelessness or student mental health or student safety or something else, those don't get inflationary increases. That stays as a fixed proviso in the budget. So we find ourselves at OSPI in a tough spot, and we're trying to be really transparent about that, but we're going to keep doing self-examination. We've already reorganized once. There'll be a little more reorg, but mostly what it'll be is how do we reprioritize dollars to keep talent here? COVID pushed a lot of people into remote work. We're now competing with people all over the country, not just Puget Sound, not just fellow educators, but when there's a talent that we have and an employer in New York on Wall Street or in Charlotte or in Los Angeles offering them a lot of money and the ability to stay in their home in Issaquah or Yakima or Colville, they can stay there. And that's the new reality of our labor market, a legislature that's underfunding inflationary impacts and the ability for people to really work from anywhere in the world, particularly the higher their skill sets, the more the demand is for them, and therefore the more these companies, particularly in the private sector, are offering the flexibility. OSPI is going to make that transformation, and we'll unveil some more details about that later, but mostly need to get it right with our staff first. We're going to do our best to make them competitive financially, and that means pulling back some programs and pulling back some resources that have been out in the field. And we've been pretty candid with policymakers, and we want to be with all of you, that we're going to offer a little less so that we can keep the talent we have, continue to recruit talent. And I think ultimately our goal, and it's been my goal for 5 years, is to not grow the place. We're slightly bigger, but basically the same size we were 5 years ago, and the same size that we were 15 years ago. So the system is more than doubled in resources, and OSPI stayed the same size. And I'm okay with that. We don't need to scale with the system. What we have to do is keep talent here. And I think you're going to find that to be challenging for you as well. I know you already have. But it's a complexity. It's real. I think you should be aware of it. So now let me make it last point is just bigger picture on all of this. Inflation is going to continue to eat us all alive. These formulas are going to drive required spending by the legislature on employee groups, on certain investments that they make, certain infrastructure that they make. And the more inflation forces those decisions, the less we get to do in terms of seeking our wants. That doesn't change the fact that we're going after a lot. Our next cycle, we will go after more than 300 million in special ed funding. We're going to go after a more comprehensive transportation fix for our school districts. We're going to continue to pursue flexibility and graduation requirements. The pandemic has taught us a lot, and I hope at a minimum what it taught you all is students are capable of pretty dynamic learning modalities. And what I mean by that is the way they get information, the way they demonstrate their knowledge can change. The learning standards themselves can be simpler and fewer, and we can go deeper. We don't have to cover so much material. And certainly by high school, our students are telling us, based on those higher ed enrollment declines, even pre-pandemic, they're not interested in sitting with us for 13 years, kindergarten to 12th grade, only to spend $100,000 to sit somewhere else for 4 years and have some expert, produce a bunch of knowledge that they're supposed to absorb. They want to touch learning more, and they want to earn income sooner. And I think you all should be prepared to partner with us to really expand what it means to have options in high school. We're going to do our darndest to keep the money flowing and to even grow it. But I think the future for us, particularly those last 2 years of high school, is more coaching, more mentorship, and more sponsorship of students in work where they're getting credit than it is about students sitting in classrooms and moving every 57 minutes to the next class in the way that we've been doing it. We intend to completely transform high school. We've been doing that. We're seeing that CT come back. We're seeing more work-based learning. We're seeing more career-connected learning, but it's just in its infancy. I'd like to see perhaps 80 or 90,000 students out of our 160,000 in the junior senior year have a significant amount of their time off of our high school campuses, particularly where they need to work and make money. Stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more of that. But be ready, because as we ask for all of this stuff and all this transformation, depending on what happens with the revenue forecasts and what happens in our state economy, you can expect the legislature to tell us that any discretionary money that they keep bringing in through higher sales and B&O tax, it's being consumed by the fact that they have to send it back out in the form of compensation, mostly to employees across state government, higher education, K-12, because they've put those inflationary indexes right in the law. And that just means be ready, right? That's competitive pressure on ESDs because you're looking for talent. You're competing with districts that are getting very large inflationary adjustments. And even when they send some money to ESDs and OSPI in our school districts, they only fund the positions that they consider the state funded ones, not the federal ones, not all that enterprising work that you're doing to build business with your districts. So the challenges are many, the opportunities are huge. And my final reminder to everybody is we do not exist for the institutions. Institutions are important for stability, but at the end of the day, if OSPI needs to go away, so be it. If the Student Achievement Council needs to get rearranged, then let's do that for students. If we need more ESDs or fewer ESDs, let's be more honest about what that takes to shrink the cost of the adults consuming resources so that students get more pathways, so that educators get more options. we bring more talent into buildings closer to our customer. And in this case, it's young people and their families in our communities. Let's take a lot more risk as adults on the institutions, and maybe not be so crystallized and ossified about how we have to defend them first. And then at the margins, we'll see what we can do to be innovative. Let's start with what students need. And if that means re-racking governance in the state and institutions, I hope you'll have a more bold exchange with us about what that looks like in the future, because we're ready to have it and we're going to initiate a lot of that. Don't know if you have questions, but I appreciate your time, and I'll turn it back to who's ever facilitating. I don't know if it's Larry or Jessica or someone else, but I'm here. I'll hang for a bit if you've got questions.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. There was one question that came through the chat, and that was whether you had any preliminary thoughts you might be able to share on what programs or services may be reduced or pulled back at OSPI as you sort of look at it, adjusting to current realities.
Yeah, we're taking a look at that right now. What we know is where we've grown on the margin. These programs where, let's say, a legislator gets something passed and they think with one position or two positions or even five that we're going to change homelessness, or we're going to change something dramatic in the world, where we're just honest in saying we're not likely to be able to do that. We're going to see what kind of flexibility we have to move that work to some existing staff, and then utilize those dollars to try to retain that team. In your case, I think we've identified $100 million that's either going direct appropriation to the 9 ESDs combined or through OSPI. And we'll look for places where maybe there's some FTE staff that come back here so that we build a better core team around a function. And then we're getting the overhead rate for that instead of the ESDs, because we've got overhead that doesn't move. When we get 4 homeless people and they tack on more people for financial literacy, they don't move our HR systems, our legal systems, our budget systems, our IT infrastructure. We don't scale with all that program enhancement. So in order to do that, we got to pull some programs back in, and then we got to start grabbing our own share of that just to maintain our functionality here. So nothing specific yet. We're taking our first look. It's a significant amount of money that passes through the ESDs. Again, most of that is the right thing to do. Where we think we're going to be able to do it with a little more effectiveness, or at least honestly tell the field, we're just not going to do that business anymore in the same way. That's what we'll be looking at. If you have ideas on things you want to let go, send them along. I mean, we would rather shrink where you don't think you're having impact, or maybe where you're subsidizing. You're getting a position out of OSPI or some money, but you're having to subsidize it with something on your own just to make it go. That's something we should stop doing. That's an insincere expectation of the legislature to give us $50,000 for a position when the position costs 100. So let us absorb that, put the work somewhere else. We'll write those annual reports and get more effect out of it, but we're just getting started.
Great, thanks. A couple more questions come through. Jessica, I see we're kind of at time for Chris. Do you want me to continue with these questions, or do you want to move on?
I think you could take another couple.
Okay, so a couple questions, Chris, from a kind of a macro point of view, the students that we've lost during COVID, your thoughts on how we might be able to recover those, what role Open Doors might play in that, Open Doors programs might play in bringing those students back in.
Yeah, language is so important here, right? What we know is we didn't lose 4% of our students. The vast bulk of this was students we never had. They're mostly 5, 6, and 7-year-olds right now. As a percentage of the whole, they are disproportionately 5, 6, and 7-year-olds who never touched the system. Their parents just never started them. So we lost enrollment. We didn't lose students at nearly the way the rhetoric is out there, although there were some. There were students who were with us and families said, I don't feel safe, I'm bringing them home, or I don't like your mask requirement at the time that we had one, or they had anxiety that there was going to be a vaccine requirement, which you now know there isn't going to be one. So there are students we can recover. We've got some grant dollars we put in place. We've got districts spending a lot of their 90% of funds to do that. And I think things like Open Doors and innovative programs are key, because some of these students want to just return to an in-person experience. And a lot of them say, I left and I had some success. I found ways to navigate the system, get my credits, get my grad pathway done, and I want to keep doing that. So I think that's important. We did have districts crank up remote learning models permanently. Even after we went in person, they opened up, remote learning academies, and they're going to stick with them. And they're going to continue to say to, their students, if this is something that you really prefer, here's an option. So I think everything's on the table. I think the numbers will recover faster than people realize, because the incoming cohorts of 5-year-olds will continue to look more and more like they have. And that has a way of getting the percentage to recover awfully quickly.
Great. And just a couple more questions here. So one is OSPI working on creating a racial equity plan or toolkit? And if one does exist, where could it be found externally? Is it available on the website or such?
Yeah, so I'm always careful about this because our own organization has this. We have gone through more training than any other state agency so far. We're the lead in the statewide DEI training work. We're kind of the pilot for the state. So we've built a ton of this. We built resources for districts. We have it in guidance all over the place, but also districts are doing this as well as ESDs. And you do have to localize this. There is no template that says do this to get to better equity, but there are key foundational pieces and key things you can look at. So I don't know where on our website. I'm not a big fan of websites, but I can guarantee you that if you give us a little time, we can get it to Jessica, we can get those resources out and distribute them to you all. In some cases, what we have built, we've learned from you all. We've gone to places where there's already really good work and we've mined that, or we've pulled some of the best parts of that. So some of you are already leaders in the work. So the answer is yes, but it may not be a convenient one-stop shop there.
Okay, perfect. And then another question is, what do you see as sort of the key measures of success as we move the system forward? Are they in graduation rates, career readiness, or are there other metrics that you would point to?
Yeah, there's such a bias in the policy world around the end of cycle metrics. So graduation rates matter a ton, and I'll never stop obsessing about them because it's the difference of $300,000-$400,000 in lifetime income. It really matters. The ceiling of not getting work and viable employment is real without a diploma. So no question that's important to us. To get there, it's going to require us to be a lot more flexible. So are we offering more dual credit? Are we offering more pathways to work? Are we giving kids credit for when they work? Like those things will become more important, but I don't want to just let go of that. I'm not a big fan of using standardized exams as any measure, because we've got a third of our kids who get a 3 or 4 in Smarter Balanced Math and ELA who never step on a college campus within a year. So this idea that our best and brightest prove themselves with a Smarter Balanced assessment, and those are the ones who go to college, it's in higher ratios, but it isn't a very great predictor. Attendance and the course taking is a better predictor. And then of course, we got to be down lower on the scale. We do look at 3rd grade reading, 3rd grade math. There are benchmark things we want to look at for performance to figure out, are we really moving the needle? Because the predictability of a graduation is very, very highly correlated to how students are performing very, very early on. So, I'm really candid about this. We haven't moved scores in 3rd grade ELA in a decade. Most of the country has not. Our strategies, I think, are wrong. I think we're still focused on whole language. Just have kids read a lot and do a lot of reading to children, and they by osmosis observe a lot of language or absorb it. I think the science of reading and the phonemic awareness and the breaking down of the systemic learning of language is going to have to change. Some of that's on us. I'm not moving my team fast enough to redo those standards, and a ton of it's on the system because that research is out there, and we're still doing whole language. We're still saying, students, here's books, and parents, you should be reading to your kids. We could be spending a lot more classroom time on the strategies of reading to change 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade scores, and they haven't budged in a decade. And so it's time to break that system, and it's time to pull money away from those strategies. If those are the strategies that districts are using or ESDs are using, we're going to have to change that or pull those funds away and get them into places that are going to use more innovative strategies. So yeah, the metrics are grad rates, on-time progress, and earlier there's sort of foundational numeracy and literacy metrics.
Thank you. And finally, last question, and just, the little tiny question, 30 seconds or less. What role can you see OSPI playing in helping further shield school districts from further unfunded mandates?
Well, we did that this year with a lot of success. So it's allies. A lot of the allies this year, right? We had a common message to the legislature, and we dialed up this year. We asked for vetoes this year of unfunded mandates. We hadn't done that before, so we're going to do more of that. I would always turn this question on you all. Your local legislators listen to you a lot more than they listen to a state agency, even somebody who's a statewide elected official. When you say to them, don't pass that bill, it's going to come with obligation and not money, they hear it very differently. What they generally hear is, yes, we love that because we want them to feel good about us and we can do anything. And so they come to town and they sit in caucus and are like, my districts aren't concerned about this bill at all. And so we all own advocacy. And if you're serious about not wanting unfunded mandates, then the time to do it isn't in the veto process. It's way early when they're in the bill and they're thinking about it, testifying and saying, a good idea, not going to do it unless it's fully funded. That's the time to do it.
Thanks, appreciate that. Hey, Chris, thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. We appreciate all you do to support the students and the educators across our state. And again, thank you for making time out of your busy schedule to be with us. So appreciate you.